Hey guys, Omar here. We're gonna do some lighting tutorials, and at first I was just gonna teach you guys how to use a flash, and I realized that there's so much more that goes into learning flash than just learning how to use the device. It's actually more important to learn how lighting works and the properties of light first before you start tackling the little device. So the 4 qualities of light that I'm gonna cover are intensity of light. Number 2, we're gonna talk about the color of light. 3, direction of light. And 4, the quality of light. So I'm here at my workbench. I got Cap, I got a little light, and we're gonna just kind of show you more than tell you how light works. Let's start with the intensity of light. Okay, so for all our lighting demonstrations, we're gonna use Captain Rogers here. And I'll be using my little desk lamp and also this LED light, this bowling. We've seen this guy before. I did a video on this light. This is a really great light. You can do colors on this light. You can also do, the way we're gonna use it today, we're gonna use it as an LED. But this is gonna be how we demonstrate how light works. Okay, so let's start with the first property of light that we care about in photography, which is the intensity of light. This simply is how much light is hitting your subject. So let's pretend the LED light here is a flash. We could have maybe a large intensity of light. So maybe the flash is in full power. And a flash, if you are using a flash, you can turn the flash down to lower the intensity of light. So kind of like a dimmer switch. So we'll simulate that here with the LED. Maybe the flash goes from full power to maybe half power, then you do quarter power, and etc. So these changes in intensity in your light are measured by what are called stops. And as a photographer, you should always be thinking in stops. So a stop will either double your, whoa, come back, Cap, clear. So a stop of light will either, one stop up will double your light, one stop down will halve your light, okay? So you can say if you're going from, let's say this is 1/8 power, if you go to, let's say, quarter power, then the light will double. And that's called a stop of light. Now, coincidentally, your camera also goes by stops. So if you go from ISO, let's say 400 to 800, that also is a stop of light. Right now, we're only talking about the light and not so much camera settings. So for now, just know that if you switch your light to each of the powers, we're moving them by stop. Now, one thing to note is not all light sources are built the same. This light source could be maybe a speed light. And so if it's a speed light, at full power, it doesn't have, let's simulate that this is full power on the speed light, okay? Well, if you use a monolight or a studio strobe, well, that full power maybe looks like this. So not all quote, full power, they're not all built the same. So just know that full power, half power, quarter power is all relative to the light you're using. So the first part of intensity, you can turn your light up or you can turn your light down. The other thing that affects intensity of the light is the distance of the light to your subject. So obviously you move the light closer, it's gonna get brighter on your subject. If you move the light further away from your subject, it's gonna get a little dimmer. Now that seems totally obvious, and I know when I was first learning photography, I was like, duh. But what you end up learning is that distance to your subject really changes in a weird way. Let me explain. So let's pretend that this light is a window light. You can actually change the amount of exposure on the person, obviously, if you move them closer to the window, hello, or if they're further away from the window. But it turns out there's actually a science to how much the light goes down. And what happens is once you learn something called the inverse square law, but it actually is really helpful because you're gonna know in a second that if you move your light by a certain amount, you can actually change the settings on your flash or the settings on your camera to get a good exposure on your subject. Okay, the inverse square law, super easy. Light source, subject at 20. If we put our subject halfway there, okay, halfway to the 0, you actually gain 2 stops of light. Every time you have the distance, it's 2 more stops. So it's not 1 stop and then 2 stops. It doesn't work that way. I have a little light meter here. And so what I'm gonna do is take a reading. And if I take a reading by Cap over here, you see it says this is f4. That means I would need to set my camera to f4 to get him properly exposed. Now, if I move him halfway towards the light, kind of over here, the 10 is halfway, and I take a reading, if you notice, it says it's f8. We just went 2 stops. We went from f4 to 5.6 to f8. Now, if we have the distance again, so we're going halfway, which is around this 4, that will be f16, f16. So we went from f8, f11, f16. All right, here's a practical example of when you could use the inverse square law, understanding what's happening. So let's say I'm at a party and I'm taking pictures of 2 people. I'm this far away and I shoot light on the people and they're perfectly exposed. But all of a sudden, 10 people come into the picture. I need to move back with my light that's set at the same power, okay? So if this is properly exposed and I double my distance, how many more stops do I need to raise my light? 2. 2 full stops. I was here and I doubled my distance so that I could get everyone in the picture. And so I can double, I have to actually go up 2 full stops of my light. That's a lot of light. Now, if I wanted to keep my flash at the same power, I could change my camera settings 2 full stops. So, for example, if I'm at ISO 800 when I took my first picture, well, now I can go to ISO 1600, 3200, and you'll get the same exposure. 2 full stops. Okay, so let's see if you understood what we just did. Here's a little quiz. Let's say this exposure right here for Cap is 5.6. That means he's perfectly exposed. But you want to move the light closer or move the person closer. What is your new f-stop if this is now properly exposed? And the answer is correct, f11. Why? Because we need to change the f-stop by 2 stops. If this was 5.6, we go f8, f11. But here's the big money question. What if you wanted to shoot at 5.6 here? What do you need to do? Where there's 2 things you can do. You can either change the settings in your camera or you can change the light. Let's start with the light. If you definitely don't want to shoot at f11, then you need to move your light how many stops down? 2. That's right. If you want to stay at 5.6, you move the person and then you move your flash power down 2 stops. So on your flash, that would look like this. Instead of quarter power, we're going to go to 1/8 power as 1 stop and 1/16 power for the 2nd stop. I just changed my light. Now, if you're at f11 and you want to change camera settings, well, you have to change maybe your ISO. For example, if your ISO is too high, like 800, well then 2 stops, 800 to 400, 400 to 200, and that'll keep you at 5.6. Okay, for this next demo, I'm gonna use these 4 little people here. So the inverse square law also comes into play if you have your light really, really, really close to a group of people. The person closest to the light is going to be not only receiving more light, what happens, this is more science of light, but what happens is light falls off very quickly when the light is close. For example, this person is a lot darker than this exposure here, okay? How much more? Probably 2 stops, 1.5 to 2 stops. Now, if you keep the light in the same place and this group of 4 is over here, well, they are more evenly exposed. Let me bring up my pinky because they're getting blocked. But the further you move away from the light, the more even the exposure is over here, okay? But light falls off so quickly where it's crazy bright, less bright, and then it sort of evens out. This is called fall off. In this group shot, Cap is way overexposed and Dr. Strange is in the dark, okay? So what you want to do to evenly expose a large group is you can move your light back. Of course, you have to raise it as you move your light back. And then they will be evenly exposed or more evenly exposed as the light is further back. One way around the inverse square law and getting around this intensity of light here is by moving your light and pointing it way beyond to the last person in your group. If you do that, you can feather some of the light off the first person here, raise your power, and then you can sort of try to evenly get enough light in the back. So that's one way you can evenly light a group instead of using the inverse square law is going to mess you up. So if the light is super close to the person, the background is dark. If you move the person away, let's raise our power, they are more, you expose them properly, the background is more even with them. So you can actually change the exposure on the background using that inverse square law. Okay, there you have it, guys. Let me know if that was helpful or if you have any questions. Some of it's a little confusing, especially the inverse square law. If I missed anything, put stuff down below so people can learn, because that's what this channel is about, just helping you. All right, I'll see you next time.